Greetings to one and all. It's your old buddy Jay here, coming at you with another episode of Countermeasures Game Changer. Now, recently I've been reviewing a whole mixture of different games that have good design and bad design, that are written well and not written well, and put together and created and programmed in an interesting way that maybe they work, maybe they don't, and lots to talk about there. I've been waiting for February to roll along because there's a lot of games coming out that I'm really interested in. And the first game that I want to talk about is a game called Elden Ring. Now, everybody who's a Dark Souls fan has been waiting for this to come out for some time. A little bit of backstory about what the Elden Ring is. So the Elden Ring is an open world action role-playing game which is developed by Fromsoft, and it is published by Bandai Namco. It is directed by the now legendary Hidetaka Miyazaki, which I'm bound to have said wrong because I'm terrible at names, pronouncing those names. And it was the first game, and hopefully not the last game, that has writing from George R.R. Martin involved with it. So he basically created this big fantasy world, lots of characters and narratives, and then Miyazaki came along and basically put his Dark Souls stamp on it. Now, this has only just been released. It came out today. So yeah, for once, I'm not reviewing something that's like 6 months old. I'm actually reviewing something that came out today. So I knew that I'm going to spend a lot of time in this game, and if I was actually going to review it when I finished it, I think that I might be like about 65 years old, because it's quite a long game, and I think it's also one of those games that you can dip in and out of quite nicely and play for a chunk of time, have a break, play something else, come back to it. I think that it's a slow burn, and that's how I like to take these FromSoft games in, because if you just try and power through and do it all in one hit, I mean, I'm hearing a sort of 90-hour mark for the full experience, which while it scares me on one level, I do feel that you have to have real investment in the characters, and I don't feel that pushing through it to try and get a review is a good idea, even though there's a lot of reviews out already, and obviously there's a lot of companies out there that have had the code for these games for a week or 2 weeks or so they've actually been able to do that and talk about it. Where obviously I'm just a normal person like yourself who buys a game off the shelf, and then I play it on the day it comes out or within close proximity to when it comes out, and I want to talk about it. So just a little bit of backstory about Miyazaki's kind of history when it comes to these kind of games. So I did a review on Demon Souls, which is basically a dungeon crawler, a very famous dungeon crawler. I haven't done a review on any of the Dark Souls games. While I have played the first one, I'm still working my way through the other two, and I kind of dropped off that a little bit. Bloodborne, I have played, and I haven't also done a review on that yet, but I did start and finish Sekiro a couple of years ago, and I really loved that game. I got so into the lore of it. I liked the mechanics. I liked how everything flowed. It felt very different from the previous games that FromSoft had created, and I got really into the pacing of that. I really liked all the stories and the gameplay and the characters and the boss fights. It was just really awesome. I can't even remember if that was my game of the year that year, but if it wasn't, it should have been, because my memories of that have just been burned into my brain of how good that experience was. So needless to say, when I heard that Elden Ring was coming out, which was the next in the series, and that old George R.R. is involved, famously wrote Game of Thrones among many other books, but that's what he's most known for and most paid for. He also takes an incredible amount of time to do any writing. I don't know if he just writes one word a day, or he just powers out loads of stuff in one day, and then a year goes by and then he does it again. I mean, every writer and all creatives have their own process, so whatever. So when they said that this was coming out and that he would be a part of it, I just assumed that I'd be a very old man by the time it came out. Now, it turns out I'm not that old, but it did take a while to come out. And it's only just been released, like I said. And this I just spent about 3 hours with it this morning, and I really think that it might be an absolute masterpiece. I mean, it takes everything that I liked about the previous game, so like this, where you've got your character generator and your all the different aspects that you can change about him, like hair and body size. You can make him look like you, or you can be someone totally different, or so it gives you the complete freedom to create your character, to name your character. Then you can have the experience of your own personal experience will be different to that of somebody else's. And I really love that about the previous games. I mean, obviously Sekiro didn't let you do that, but Demon Souls, Dark Souls, they allow you to create your own character. I think it's really important. Sekiro was a different thing, because that was a story about a certain character that they didn't want to give you the freedom to change him. But with this game, you're taking the quest on. It's your own personal journey, and I think they should have that character creator, and they do, and it is awesome. It keeps in all the things that are good about the previous character generators, and it takes out all the stuff that annoyed me. So again, the lore behind it is all really interesting. The start of this game just kind of shows you, I mean, you're seeing it here, where it's like a whole series of really cool illustrations that are telling you all about the backstory of the Elden Ring, what that means to the place that this takes place, what that means for the knights and the warriors that have been in various battles that have fallen, and that is how you start the game. You start the game as one of the Tarnished, and basically one of the Tarnished is one of the people that had been slain in battle, and you are miraculously brought back to life. And that's how all these games start, where you just kind of start by sort of getting up off the ground, having been laying there for an indefinite amount of time, and then you start your quest. And I think it's quite a nice way to start it. And I can't really go into too much detail about the further points of the story without going into spoilers. I have seen all of the trailers and read various things, so I know a little bit about what's coming up, but not too much. But I will say that this game is fast. It takes aspects from all of the other games in terms of the mechanics of the gameplay. So your movement is really quick. You've got a jump button. You've got your dodge and roll, and all of that stuff is very fluid. So it's taking pointers from things like Bloodborne and Sekiro, but it's applying them to the kind of dungeon crawler approach of Dark Souls and Demon Souls. And I guess the Demon Souls remake is the one that's probably closest to this in terms of how your character moves and how they navigate through the environment and things like that. So I do feel that they've learned a lot on those previous games, and I always like to see that. There's no step backwards. They're moving forward. They're constantly looking, right, what's working, what isn't, and they're just refining. And this game, I mean, I just thought, I'll just play it for an hour, I'll get a feel for it, and then I've got a bit to talk about. But actually, I ended up getting sucked right into it, and I cannot wait to get back into it and play some more. So like previous games, like the Dark Souls series, other players can leave their messages on the floor, so you can come along and it will say things like, there's a boss around the corner, or there's a hidden chest, or some people put down messages that are wrong, so they'll say things like, jump off this cliff for a secret ending or whatever, and it's obviously a lie just to kill you off, but that's interesting. So there's a level of interactivity with real people without actually having to have real people in it. That said, you can have real people in it, so you can play this as co-op. You can go into various kind of spawn points in the game that will allow you to summon other players, and then they can bring their builds of characters in. So maybe they aren't like me. I was remember if I'm a knight or what I was in the end, basically there's a whole lot of different classes like wizards and samurai and things like that, so you've got a lot of different classes to choose from. I do think that like I said, the gameplay is very interesting. I think that they've managed to maintain all of the cool things that I liked about the previous ones. They've given you a shield, they allow you to swap it out for bows and arrows, you've got different kinds of swords, and as you progress through the game, you gradually get new armor and new assets that can allow you to kind of navigate this world in a slightly different way. Now, one thing that is really cool about this is they've now introduced like a kind of stealth aspect, which a lot of the other games didn't really have. So you can crouch and you can hide in bushes, you can do stealth kills on things, which is really good. The previous games, while they were kind of open world, there was a very linear path that you were really sort of meant to follow. You could go off and do kind of side characters, blah, 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 but eventually it will bottleneck back into taking you down the path that you were meant to be going on. With this game, it's actually a different kind of approach, because this is really the first game where you step out of the initial dungeon that you're in, and it's very open world. You know, you immediately you're greeted by an absolute delight, a visual delight in front of you, with all of the quality of the graphics, the detailing on the buildings, the beauty of this kind of enormously bright sort of tree of life in the core of the map. And it's this huge open world map where you can go and do things in any order you want to. It really does take a kind of leaf out of the Breath of the Wild approach, which is, here you are and you can go in any direction, you can do anything. Now, I'm sure as I progress through, there will be moments where it bottlenecks and there's things that you have to achieve in certain order, as it gets sort of further down the line. But initially, I just think the idea that kind of, like stepping out of Vault 76, or, it's like when you first sort of look over the landscape and there's the possibility of going in any direction. That freedom is something that you only really experience these days in things like Assassin's Creed. And I see a little bit of Assassin's Creed creeping into this, but not too much. And I think that again, they've taken a look at the things that are successful and they're like, what do people like? What do they want more of in this game? And, what works and what doesn't. So they've added a little bit of that in. And I think that's not a bad thing, because I do love Assassin's Creed for all its faults. Excuse me. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't want to go too much more into it, other than I think that it possibly is a masterpiece. I mean, I know a lot of reviewers are giving it 10s. I'm not actually going to give it a score because that seems a little bit unfair. I'm only sort of doing a kind of preview review sort of look at it, just sort of comparing it to the previous games, because I just feel that without spending any quality time with it, you can't really give this the score that it deserves. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. And in about 20 years, when I've finished it, I'll do a proper review of it and talk about what was good and what wasn't. But a lot of reviews seem to be sort of aiming at 9s and 10s. I know IGN gave it a masterpiece, and and there's just lots of things happening here that were limited by the hardware of previous iterations of these games, previous Fromsoft games, and now the limitations feel completely lifted and that anything goes. I mean, you couldn't have had such a huge open world like this with kind of moving animals and creatures, and you can see boss fights coming up in the distance with these big monsters looming, and they're just sort of hanging out until you're ready to fight you. And I just really feel that that's something that you wouldn't have seen in the previous games, purely maybe for the way they were designed in terms of sort of taking you down more of a linear path, but also because the capabilities of the previous generations of consoles and PCs as well, etc., wouldn't have been able to handle such a lot going on in such a massive space. But now these consoles are just, this is all on the PS5, and it's breathtaking. It really is breathtaking. I love the art direction. I love the lore behind it. I can't wait to get stuck into the whole thing, really build my character out. I love the challenge. So, the fact that you get to a certain point, and if you get taken out by a bad guy, there's a chance you might lose a lot of the things that you've collected in that run. So there's all of that is still there, and it just adds a level of how much more can I keep going before I absolutely have to save, and then the characters get regenerated around you, and then you can grind again to get more energy for your flasks. And I mean, it's just a brilliant, intricate array of systems that anyone who's a Dark Souls fan will know all about. Anyone who isn't will, there's a learning curve, but it's not that steep. And I just feel they're layered and layered and layered, and just to give you the best experience they possibly can. Now, I understand there have been some kind of issues in terms of performance on release for PC, but what isn't that's released on PC that doesn't have a problem that's as vast and has such a massive scope like this does? I think that there are always issues. So that's the thing about someone having such a visionary idea, such a large taking such a huge risk to do something new and innovative and really push things forward, there's always going to be little things like that at the start that are going to be a problem. But ultimately, I mean, like Cyberpunk, that had loads of problems at launch. It hasn't stopped people from loving it, and I loved it. And despite its flaws, and I feel that if this does come up against some of that, then it doesn't matter, because what they're trying to achieve is above and beyond anything that's ever been done before. So I say push it further. If you have to make mistakes, then that's how we learn, and then you correct them next time and things improve and get better. Just kind of playing it safe and sticking to the old mundane blueprint is not necessarily the way to go for me. So I'm glad that there are creatives out there that are doing something interesting like this. I'm glad there are writers out there that are really diving deeper than anyone really should need to go into these games. I mean, the lore behind these games is just ridiculous. And when you've got George R.R. Martin, who created Game of Thrones from scratch, I mean, you're talking about a wealth of creativity just crammed into this potential 90-hour game, if not longer. I just love it. I just love the whole idea of it, and I can't wait to spend more time with it. So yeah, that's it. I really recommend that you try this one out. If you've never played a Dark Souls game before, or you've never played a Fromsoft game before, Bloodborne or whatever, it doesn't matter, because there is something here for you. And if you have, then you're going to get a lot out of that too. So yeah, that's about it. I can't recommend this one enough. So it comes with Daddy JJ's badass seal of approval, and I will do a review at some point and talk about my experience with it. So yeah, thanks very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and comments and all the usual stuff. And I'll see you next time on the next Countermeasures Game Changer. So all that's left to say is be good, stay safe, and be kind to one another. Cheers.